Somewhere along a gravel roadside near you, right now, there's a plant blooming in soft pink clusters that most people walk past without a second glance. For over 2,000 years, that same plant was the answer to nearly every washing problem a household could have. It cleaned hair, clothing, wool, silk, even the togas worn by Roman senators. No factory built it. No chemist formulated it. It grew wild across Europe and Western Asia, and people simply reached down, crushed a handful of its leaves in water, and got a soft, foamy lather strong enough to lift grease and grime. That plant is Saponaria officinalis, commonly called soapwort, and its very name comes from the Latin word sapo, meaning soap. The Romans weren't being poetic. They named the plant exactly what it did. Crush the leaves, boil the roots, and you get a mild, effective cleanser that predates detergent by thousands of years. So why does almost nobody know this today? The answer involves a German chemist, an American consumer goods giant, and a business decision made in the 1930s that quietly erased a plant from public memory, not because it stopped working, but because it stopped being profitable to talk about. And today we're tracing exactly how that happened. The story of washing goes back further than most people assume. Archaeologists have identified a Sumerian clay tablet dating to roughly 2800 BCE, currently held in the collections referenced by the British Museum, describing a mixture of animal fat, wood ash, and water used for cleaning. Considered the earliest written soap-making record in existence, but plants offered a gentler, more accessible path long before anyone was boiling fat over a fire. In ancient Egypt, laborers and elites alike used soapwort-like plants combined with natron, a naturally occurring mineral salt harvested from dry lake beds, to wash both skin and hair, a practice referenced in papyrus fragments studied by Egyptologists at the University of Manchester. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley, archaeological work at sites like Mohenjo-Daro has uncovered evidence that people were combining soap nuts, known as retha, with shikakai pods and dried amla fruit as early as 2500 BCE, a three-ingredient formula still sold in Indian markets today. The word we use constantly without thinking about its origin, shampoo, comes directly from this tradition. It derives from the Hindi word shampoo, itself rooted in the Sanskrit champna, meaning to press or knead, and it entered English usage in the 1760s through British colonial contact with India. Every one of these ancient cleaning agents worked for the exact same chemical reason. They contained saponins, natural compounds with a molecular structure that has one end attracted to water and one end attracted to oil, allowing them to trap grease and lift it away when rinsed. It's the same basic principle behind every synthetic surfactant in your shower today, except plants figured it out roughly 100 million years before we did. Roman bathhouses were not just places to get clean, they were the social centers of the empire, and soapwort played a working role in that culture, grown deliberately in gardens for its gentle lather. But its bigger economic role happened somewhere less glamorous, the textile workshops. The Greek physician Dioscorides, writing his pharmacological reference, Materia Medica, in the 1st century CE, documented a plant he called struthion, describing how fullers, the textile workers responsible for cleaning raw wool, relied on it during a process called scouring. Wool straight off a sheep is coated in lanolin, dirt, and grease, and cleaning it required something powerful enough to strip that buildup, but gentle enough not to destroy the fiber. Harsh alternatives existed. Stale urine, rich in ammonia, worked as a degreaser, but came with an obvious downside. Fuller's earth, an absorbent clay, worked slowly and inconsistently. Soapwort split the difference, cleaning effectively without weakening the wool fibers, which is precisely why French artisans eventually named the plant herb a faulin, literally fuller's herb. Medieval wool was one of the largest industries in Europe, and English wool exports alone, according to economic historians studying the medieval cloth trade at the University of Cambridge, represented one of the kingdom's most valuable commodities by the 13th century. A wild roadside plant had become quiet infrastructure for an entire continental economy. By the medieval period, soapwort had migrated from wild ditches into cultivated monastery gardens. Franciscan and Dominican monks grew it deliberately, and monastery gardens across Europe functioned as combination pharmacies and general stores, stocking only plants considered genuinely essential. Farmers in the Swiss Alps used soapwort solution to wash sheep before shearing, softening the fleece for easier processing, a practice still referenced in regional agricultural histories published by ETH Zurich's Agricultural Archives. During the Tudor period in England, the wealthy developed a taste for elaborate lace ruffles and fine embroidered silk, fabrics too delicate to survive the increasingly common harsh lye-based soaps. Soapwort remained the only reliable option gentle enough to clean these fabrics without damaging the fibers, while also leaving behind a faint natural luster. The English herbalist John Gerard documented the plant extensively in his 1597 text Herbal, praising its cleaning power while also warning, correctly, that once established in a garden, it becomes nearly impossible to eradicate. That same gentleness is exactly why, centuries later, a very specific group of professionals still can't find a modern replacement for it. The shift away from soapwort didn't happen because something better came along. It happened because something more profitable did. In 1898, a German chemist named Hans Schwarzkopf opened a drugstore in Berlin and began selling a powdered hair wash product that customers dissolved in water. One of the earliest commercially packaged hair cleaning products in Europe. It was modest, but it planted a seed, the idea that washing your hair could be a purchased product rather than a plant you grew or gathered. Schwarzkopf's company eventually launched a liquid shampoo formulation in 1927, but it was still soap-based, meaning it still shared the same core chemistry as saponin plants, just packaged more conveniently. Soap-based cleansers had one persistent flaw, though. They reacted poorly with hard water, leaving a dull, chalky residue on hair, a problem people had solved for centuries with a simple vinegar rinse. In 1933, Procter & Gamble, the Cincinnati-based consumer goods company, launched Dren, widely credited by cosmetic chemistry historians as the first shampoo made entirely from synthetic surfactants rather than soap, using an early form of what we now know as sodium lauryl sulfate. It solved the hard water problem completely, rinsed cleanly, and could be mass-produced cheaply in enormous batches. By the 1950s, industry surveys cited in trade publications from the era showed the majority of American households had switched to dedicated shampoo products, and by the 1970s, daily hair washing had become a cultural expectation, reinforced by advertising campaigns positioning natural alternatives as outdated and unhygienic. Here's the part almost nobody expects. Soapwort never actually disappeared, it just moved into one of the most specialized fields imaginable, textile conservation. Museum conservators at institutions including the Victoria and Albert Museum in London have documented using soapwort root solution to clean centuries-old tapestries, silk vestments, and lace too fragile to survive modern detergents. Research published in Studies on Historic Textile Conservation has confirmed what fullers understood by instinct 1,000 years ago. Saponins interact far more gently with protein-based fibers like silk and wool than synthetic surfactants, which can gradually degrade delicate antique fabric over repeated cleanings. When a 500-year-old tapestry can't be replaced if a cleaning method goes wrong, conservators still reach for the same plant Roman fullers used, because nothing synthetic has managed to replicate its gentleness without also replicating its cost and inconvenience at industrial scale. Saponaria officinalis still grows wild today across most of the northern hemisphere's temperate zones, thriving in USDA hardiness zones 2 through 8, reaching 12 to 36 inches tall, and blooming through midsummer into early fall. You can grow it yourself. Simmer the roots for about 30 minutes, strain the liquid, and use it as a genuinely gentle hair or fabric wash. Though it's worth noting saponins are toxic to fish in concentrated amounts and shouldn't be dumped near ponds or waterways. Soapwort wasn't abandoned because it failed. It was abandoned because an industry figured out how to bottle, brand, and sell a synthetic version of something nature had already perfected for free. If this story changed how you think about the products lining your bathroom shelf, subscribe, because soapwort almost certainly isn't the only forgotten solution still growing quietly on the side of the road, waiting for someone to remember it.